Hi, you guys. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to review some topics about energy flow in the ecosystem as well as group behavior. And this is to go ahead and to kind of prepare you guys for your quiz. So first and foremost, kind of going over some of the guiding questions for our chapter. So number one, why do some populations grow, decline, or remain stable? So as you guys remember, there are a couple of different types of growth in this case. Right, there is exponential, in which we go ahead and we keep on growing forever and ever, and your graph kind of looks like this, and the population just shoots up like a J, right? And then you guys go ahead and you have your logistic graph. And that graph is going to go ahead and it grows exponentially, and then it levels out. And where it levels out, that is our carrying capacity, right? So those are our things on there. Right. So, some populations go ahead and they grow, right, because they have enough resources. And it really does come down to resources. If you do not have enough resources, your population is not going to grow, plain and simple, right? You decline because there is basically not enough resources. So, if there's not enough food, if there's not enough water, if there's not enough space, right, if there's not enough mates, any of that stuff kind of go ahead and it causes a population to decline. If we are stable, it means that we have reached carrying capacity, right? So we reach carrying capacity. And because we reach carrying capacity, we are going ahead and we are stable with our environment, right? So we are stable with environment, right? So that goes ahead and that causes the population to kind of level out, right? So that is our first thing. Next thing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about how energy is transferred between species in a community, right? So this kind of leads us into our trophic pyramid, right? So we have our pyramid that looks some deal like that, right? And we got 3 levels going on. We have our producers at the bottom, and producers, they make their own food. They make food. So they make food, pretty much the producers make food for everybody in the ecosystem, right? Then we go ahead and we have our consumers, right? So we have pretty much our primary consumers. Consumers. And our primary consumers, they go ahead and there are herbivores. And they eat producers only. Right. And then next thing is going to be like our secondary and tertiary consumers. Right. And these guys are our predators, right? Our predator that it's going to be at the top is going to be our apex predator. And they are the ones that are like at the top of the food chain. So what happens is that the producers, they make all the food, right? So the producers go ahead and they make tons and tons of energy, and they make food using the sun. So they go ahead and they make food using the sun, and what happens is that 90% of that energy that they are going ahead and that they are making, right, 90% is for themselves, and that goes for every level. At every level, 90% is for the animal at that level, for animal or plant. At that level, right? And then 10% gets passed down. Right? So 10% gets passed. So only 10% of the energy that is formed gets passed down. So that goes ahead and that comes into our rule of 10%. Right? So those are things that we see on there. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to advantages and disadvantages of social and solitary behavior, right? So animal behavior advantages. And there are a few that we are going to go ahead and we're going to go through. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and we're going to define social and solitary. So pretty much social, this is going to be our groups, right? And solitary, it means that you're flying solo, right? Which means by themselves. So those are our two things, right? So there's some advantages and there's some disadvantages, right? If you are social, your huge advantage is that you have to share. As much as it is a disadvantage, right? The whole thing about sharing, it kind of goes both ways, right? So in groups, the big thing is that you share, right? You share both the good and the bad, right? So the good things that you share is like food. You can share water. If somebody finds food, like you can also eat that as well, right? But the thing that comes with sharing is that you also share the not so good things, right? So in a social situation, you share diseases easily, right? It's because diseases get passed down from animal to animal. So you also are not sharing. That's not a good thing to share. Also, when there's a shortage, right? Shortage of a resource, right? That shortage of the resource is going to go ahead and that's going to backfire onto everybody into that community, right? So they're going to go ahead and they are not going to go ahead and not have enough. The other good thing about sharing is that you guys can also like take turns in like a social situation, right? So you can have divided jobs, right? And that goes for protection, is the big one, right? So being in a group ultimately provides you protection because you have, like a bunch of extra eyes around your back. So that really helps in going ahead and being in a social situation. If you are by yourself, right? The big thing is that you have to do everything yourself. So you are self-reliant. Reliant. So that means that you are / responsible, right? So you are responsible for everything. So if you don't find food, you don't have food. If you have food and you found food, then you have lots of food, right? So that is the thing, is that you are responsible for yourself, right? So you have to find own resources. You have to make sure that you have enough for you, right? The good thing is that there's less to provide for. Like you ultimately need less. But the bad thing is that if you cannot hunt for some other reason because that animal's hurt and it can't hunt by itself and can't catch anything, right? Because you're not in a group or a pack, in which a group or a pack will help you go ahead and find stuff, right? A solo animal is more likely to die in that situation. Also, you're also kind of like thinking that a solo animal can be advantageous if you are like a bigger animal. Like if you're a bigger animal and you need to eat a lot, right? Then you don't really want to go ahead and don't really want to be with a bunch of other big animals that need to eat a lot, because then you guys are ultimately sharing, right, what little you guys have. Okay, so those are our things on there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on into the food web, and we're going to look at this food web for a little bit. Mine is very fuzzy, but we will get through it. Okay, so on this food web, we have to go ahead and we're going to start by doing our trophic levels. Right, so our trophic levels here is we have our producers, which are our plants, right? And again, they make their own food. We have our primary consumers, and these are the animals that are our herbivores. And if you guys ever forget what that means, herbivores, right? If you guys ever forget what that means, herb is a plant, right? So that means that they eat plants. So that's kind of one way to kind of remember that. Then we have our secondary consumers. Oopsies. Consumers. These can go either way. These are either omnivores or herb